powerful banned book that chronicles injustice around you, The Diary of Anne Frank. Anne Frank, born into a wealthy Jewish family in Frankfurt, Germany, became the voice of millions silenced during one of history's darkest times. After Hitler came to power in 1933, waves of anti-Semitic persecution swept through Germany, forcing Anne's family to flee to the Netherlands. During World War II, hidden in a secret annex to escape the Nazi hunts, a young Jewish girl documented her world with raw truth. That truth made The Diary of Anne Frank one of the greatest literary works of the modern age. Her house, a young girl's former home, stands quiet. You enter through a narrow doorway, climb a steep staircase, and reach a quiet corner of the office building. There, you turn the famous bookcase that once concealed a hidden door, revealing a cold, narrow space behind it, steeped in iron-gray shadows. Outside a window, a chestnut tree stretches into spring with pale green buds. Far off, the church steeple rises. These images leap from memory so vivid it feels like stepping into Anne's world. Her name was Anne Frank, the girl behind the once banned, now world-renowned classic, The Diary of Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt, into a well-off Jewish family. When Hitler rose to power in 1933, the wave of anti-Jewish oppression began. The Franks sought refuge in the Netherlands. Anne's father, Otto Frank, was a sharp businessman who started a company in Amsterdam, selling pectin for making jam. But when Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands in 1940, conquering the country in just 1 week, the Franks' lives changed forever. Whispers of Jews being deported to concentration camps spread fear. Otto began preparing a hidden annex at the top of his company building, disguised so cleverly it was nearly impossible to detect. One day, he approached his colleague, Miep Jais. "Dear Miep, you know what it means to be Jewish in these times. If the day comes that I ask for your help, it may put you in danger. But I don't know who else I can trust. Will you help us?" Miep, a kind, plump young woman with large eyes, nodded solemnly. She was compassionate, upright, and brave. On Anne's 13th birthday in 1942, she received a red and white checkered diary with a small brass lock. With each click, the diary opened up to Anne's world, and with another click, that world was sealed and hidden. From that day forward, Anne began to write. On July 5, 1942, a Sunday, Anne was sunbathing on the rooftop when the doorbell rang downstairs. She hoped it was her secret crush visiting, but it wasn't. It was a Nazi official delivering a summons for her sister Margot to report to a labor camp in the East, their worst fear realized. The very next day, the Frank family vanished. Nazi authorities assumed they had fled to Switzerland. But they hadn't. Otto knew that escape route was also full of danger and Nazi patrols. Instead, they began their life in hiding in the secret annex, and Anne, of course, brought her beloved diary. Soon, a Jewish family friend of Otto's joined them, and the secret annex became home to 8 people. To stay safe, they followed strict rules. Speak in whispers. No running water during the day, socks only on the floorboards. And only after office hours could they use the space more freely and listen to the radio. The outside world was separated by a heavy, rotating bookcase. Miep and a few trusted colleagues brought them food and supplies. Anne poured her heart into her diary, which she named Kitty, writing to it like a loyal friend. "Kitty, I like the host on the Dutch resistance radio. He makes me dream of becoming a journalist. I want to write endlessly, but can I ever write something truly great?" Among the hidden group was Peter, a boy 3 years older. "Kitty, I think I like Peter. He's so shy." "Oh dear, are all boys so childish? How are their thoughts so simple and silly?" Despite their confined life, Anne and Peter found time for shy little dates in the attic. Radio broadcasts brought dark news, more arrests, more camps, gas chambers. But Anne remained a girl of light. Even when the Gestapo once searched the offices below them, she did not give up hope. One day, she heard a BBC broadcast urging people in Nazi-occupied territories to document their lives. To write diaries, to tell the truth, no matter how dark the days. This inspired Anne to write with renewed purpose. Her favorite spot was by the window, where only a thin pane of glass separated her from the real world. She watched the chestnut tree change through the seasons, from bloom to fruit to bear, mirroring her own longing for life. She loved the sound of church bells, finding peace in them, feeling closer to God. Her final diary entry was dated August 1, 1944. Just 3 days later, on August 4th, the Gestapo, tipped off by an informant, broke through the bookcase, stormed the annex, and arrested everyone. They were sent to concentration camps. After the arrest, Miep returned to the ransacked annex and, among scattered books and papers, discovered Anne's diary. She didn't open the brass lock. Instead, she kept it safe and gave it to Otto after the war, the only one of the 8 to survive. Otto, still hoping for his daughter's return, also didn't open the diary right away. But then, the heartbreaking news came. Anne and Margot had died in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Anne passed away just weeks before Allied forces liberated the camp. Only after hearing this did Otto finally unlock the diary. With a click, Anne's beautiful, brief life returned to the world. Otto wept and couldn't stop. Since its first publication in 1947, the Diary of Anne Frank has sold over 30 million copies in 65 languages, becoming the most widely read and influential literary work on World War II. In 2009, it was officially added to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register for its extraordinary record of truth through a young girl's eyes. Germany, as the perpetrator of this human tragedy, struggled for years after the war to confront its past. Government attempts to educate the public about the evils of Hitler's fascism often failed to resonate. But in 1950, a German edition of the Diary of Anne Frank was published by Lambert Schneider in Heidelberg. It struck a deep chord. Germans knew that politicians often rewrite history. They'd seen it happen. But a young girl's diary, raw and honest, broke through the silence. It shook the nation and forced it to reckon with its crimes. Because of Anne's truth, neo-Nazism and extremist ideologies have remained hard to revive. Pick up the pen, will evil be kept away from future generations? So, who betrayed Anne Frank? For decades, one of World War II's most haunting mysteries remained unsolved. Who betrayed Anne Frank and her family, leading to their arrest after 2 years of hiding? Now, after 6 years of cold case investigation, a team led by a former FBI agent believes they may have found the answer, a revelation that has shocked historians and readers alike. A new investigation. Vince Pankoke, a retired FBI agent, teamed up with a group of around 20 experts, including historians, criminologists, and data analysts, to re-examine the case with modern technology and a fresh perspective. Their findings are presented in a 2022 book titled The Betrayal of Anne Frank by Canadian author Rosemary Sullivan. The team's most startling conclusion? That the informant may have been Arnold van den Bergh, a little-known Jewish notary in Amsterdam, a man who may have betrayed Anne Frank's family to save his own. A desperate choice. Van den Bergh, according to the investigation, was a member of the Nazi-controlled Jewish Council in the Netherlands, an administrative body the Nazis forced Jewish citizens to establish to manage deportation logistics. At first, Van den Bergh managed to protect his family from deportation. But when those protections were revoked, investigators believe he may have been cornered, choosing to give up information about other Jews in hiding, including the Franks, to protect his children. He had both motive and opportunity. As a notary, Van den Bergh was also involved in transactions involving art looted from Jews, some of which ended up in the hands of top Nazi leaders like Hermann Göring. His access to Nazi officials, paired with his growing desperation, created a chilling but plausible scenario. The anonymous letter. The key breakthrough came from an old, nearly forgotten piece of evidence, an anonymous letter sent to Otto Frank shortly after the war. The letter named Van den Bergh as the person who had disclosed their hiding place. Otto took the letter seriously, but chose not to publicize it. In 1964, Otto told police about the letter, but the information never made headlines. Investigators found a copy of the letter in police files. The new team believes this letter, combined with data analysis and archival research, points to Van den Bergh as the likely betrayer. "We didn't find a smoking gun," Pankoke admitted in an interview with Dutch broadcaster NUS, "but we did find a hot weapon with empty shell casings beside it." Shadows of doubt. Still, not everyone is convinced. The Annefrankhouse Museum, which preserves the family's hiding place and legacy, acknowledged the importance of the new findings but urged caution. Ronald Leopold, the museum's director, said there are still unanswered questions, such as who wrote the anonymous letter and why. There's also the ethical complexity of revealing the alleged informant's identity. Van den Bergh died of throat cancer in 1950 and was never publicly suspected. The team suspects that Otto Frank chose not to reveal the name to avoid fueling anti-Semitic backlash and to protect Van den Bergh's 3 daughters from shame. A human dilemma. Thijs Bayons, a Dutch filmmaker who co-produced the investigation, stressed that the goal was not to demonize anyone. "It was the Nazis who forced people to make these terrible choices," he said. The real question is, what would you have done if you were in their position? Anne Frank's diary endures as one of the most powerful accounts of the Holocaust. A testimony to hope, resilience, and the human spirit. Now, as new light is shed on the betrayal that led to her death, we are reminded again of the impossible choices people faced in the darkest chapters of history. I Am Anne, the astonishing story of Barbro Karlen. It was the 1960s, in a quiet Swedish elementary school classroom. The teacher was telling the children the tragic story of Anne Frank. Suddenly, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8, looked up, puzzled. "How does the teacher know about me?" she asked. That girl was Barbro Karlen. Born in 1954 into a Christian family in Sweden, Barbro began speaking of a different life before she was even 3 years old. "I am Anne Frank," she told her bewildered parents. At the time, the diary of Anne Frank hadn't yet been published in Swedish, so her parents had no idea who Anne Frank was. They assumed their daughter had simply invented an imaginary friend. But strange things kept happening. Barbro began suffering from terrifying nightmares, always the same. Men in boots storming upstairs, kicking down the hidden door to the attic. She became paralyzed with fear whenever she saw men in uniforms. She once mumbled while eating beans, "We used to eat this all the time. I don't want it anymore." No one understood what used to meant. She was referring to the 2 years Anne Frank spent in hiding. Barbro refused to take showers or cut her hair. Her parents couldn't know that these were traumas passed down from Auschwitz. New arrivals were stripped, shaved, and forced into showers that, for many, released poison gas. But Barbro remembered. Worried for her mental health, her parents took her to a psychiatrist. By then, Barbro had learned, grown-ups didn't believe in Anne's world. So she said nothing. The psychiatrist found no issues. Barbro was mentally sound. Back to the secret annex. When Barbro was 10, the family took a trip across Europe, including a stop in Amsterdam. By then, her parents had finally read the diary of Anne Frank in Swedish and realized Anne had been real. While in Amsterdam, her father reached for the hotel phone to call a taxi to the Anne Frank house, now a museum. But Barbro stopped him. "We don't need a taxi. It's close. We can walk." Despite the winding maze of Amsterdam streets, the girl led them confidently, turning corners with ease. After about 10 minutes, she pointed. "It's just around this next corner." And it was. Standing before the Anne Frank house, Barbro murmured, "That's strange. It didn't used to look like this." The front steps had been rebuilt for the museum. Inside, she walked up the narrow stairs as if she'd done it 100 times. Suddenly, her face turned pale. She grabbed her mother's hand. It was ice cold. They had reached the secret annex. But Barbro kept going, as though searching for something. Then they stepped into a small room. Barbro's eyes lit up. "Look!" she cried. "The movie star pictures are still there!" Her joy was radiant. She had come home. That room had once been Anne's, where she'd pasted movie star clippings to the wall for comfort. But now, her mother saw only a bare wall. Confused, she asked a nearby guide. The guide explained that yes, the photos had been there. But just 2 weeks ago, they were taken down to be preserved under glass. The realization struck Barbro's mother like lightning. Her daughter had known. She had recognized streets, stairs, decorations long gone. She pulled Barbro into her arms and said, "Now I understand. You'll never be alone again." From that day on, her parents embraced Barbro's story. And she, once shadowed by fear, began to blossom. The return of Anne's pen. Barbro's talent for writing soon emerged with dazzling force. As if continuing the dream Anne once had, Barbro began publishing. At age 12, her first book, Man on Earth, became the best-selling prose poetry collection in Swedish history. By 16, she had written 11 books, translated into multiple languages, echoing the global legacy of Anne Frank. But never once did she mention her former identity. The wolves howled. After age 15, Barbro's memories of her past life began to fade. By 17, they were almost entirely gone. She went on to live an ordinary life, even becoming a police officer. She thought Anne's chapter had closed for good. But in her 40s, 2 fellow officers attempted to harm her, nearly killing her. Then, in a vivid dream, her Anne Frank memories returned. She re-experienced Anne's final days. In horror, she recognized the 2 officers. They were the reincarnations of the same Nazis who had once persecuted her. Barbro understood. Her memories had been preserved for a reason, to speak the truth. To remind the world that karma exists, that the threads of past and present are more tightly wound than we imagine. And so, she wrote her autobiography. And the Wolves Howled. In it, she unveiled her connection to Anne Frank and the karmic entanglement with those who had once destroyed her life. "They won't win this time," she wrote. "Because this time, I am stronger." The book was a sensation, praised by many, mocked by some. Critics questioned the reincarnation claim, but Barbro wasn't alone. She had allies, including Dr. Ian Stevenson's reincarnation research team at the University of Virginia. After comparing Anne and Barbro's appearance, personality, and spirit, they concluded her story was credible. Anne's cousin, Buddy Elias, president of the Anne Frank Foundation, also became a believer. When And the Wolves Howled was ready to publish, Buddy secretly invited Barbro to dinner under the guise of being just a fan. The moment she saw him, Barbro burst into tears and embraced him. He too wept, stunned by her resemblance to Anne. From then on, they were dear friends. At her German book launch, Buddy proudly stood by her side. Perhaps her mission was complete. Barbro later moved to the United States and chose a quieter life.
Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Share it, because some stories are meant to be discovered together. And stay curious. I'll see you in the next chapter.